Hello again, and welcome to another message from Wake Up America Ministries. And we're going to continue our series on why we, the church, should support Israel. And today, uh, I would just remind you real quickly that last week we ended with Joshua and the children of Israel crossing over the Jordan River on dry land after the priest uh, put their feet in the edge of the water, and the waters departed, and the waters dried, and they crossed over to take possession of the land of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. Uh, and we're going to focus today on Jerusalem. We're going to skip over some things, not doing the entire history of Israel. You can read that and study that for yourself, but the importance of Jerusalem. We hear a lot about that in the news today, about the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians and the Arab world, and what is the big squabble over this little piece of land called Jerusalem. And so today I want to reinforce our knowledge and our belief and why we should support Israel, and why it's so important for Christians to understand that Israel is not an occupying or an apartheid state, uh, but they are truly living in the land which God gave them, which is His right to do so. So we're going to start today in Deuteronomy chapter 12, and there's verse 1 through 14. We're not going to take the time to read them all. I'm just going to read you the most important part of that, and you can read the rest for yourself. And so this is, remember, Moses was still leading the children of Israel at this time, so they've not crossed over. This is Moses writing this for the people for a later time. Okay, we're going to read verses 9 through 14. So here we go. For ye are not as yet come to the rest and to the inheritance which the Lord your God giveth you. But when ye go over Jordan, and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when He giveth you rest from your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause His name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes, and the heave offering of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye and your sons and your daughters and your men servants and your maid servants, and the Levite that is within your gates, for as much as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to thyself that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes, there thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there thou shalt do all that I command thee. All right, so now remember, at this time, the children of Israel, they don't have a temple. All they have is the tabernacle, which they're able to tear down and move, relocate, as God led them through the wilderness by the cloud by day and fire by night. And it was up to the Levites to handle basically moving the temple and the ark and all that stuff. So anyway, so we're going to skip over now, and we're going to jump way ahead to the period of the kings. So remember, Moses, after they crossed in, Moses couldn't cross over the Jordan because he had sinned against the Lord, but Joshua took the children of Israel across the Jordan River, and we entered into what's called the period of the judges. And then after the judges came, the prophets, there was the period of the kings. And so this is where we're going to jump to now, is the period of the kings. So remember that King Saul was the first king of Israel. And then Saul, he sinned against the Lord, and the Lord stripped his kingdom from him, and he passed it on to the tribe of Judah, and David became the second king of Israel. And then David, basically, he fought many wars, many battles, shed a lot of blood, and David had a desire in his heart to build a temple for the Lord, but the Lord would not allow him to do so because he had blood on his hands. And so that privilege was passed on to his son Solomon, who became king after David. So this is where we're going to go to. We're going to go to 2 Chronicles chapter 6, I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. All right. So then said Solomon, the Lord hath said that he would dwell in the thick darkness. But I have built him a house of habitation for thee, and a place for thy dwelling forever. And the king turned his face, and blessed the whole congregation of Israel, and all the congregation of Israel stood. And he and he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who hath with his hands fulfilled that which he spake with his mouth to my father David, saying, Since today that I brought forth my people out of the land of Egypt, I chose no city among all the tribes of Israel to build an house in, that my name might be there. Neither choose I any man to be a ruler over my people Israel, but I have chosen Jerusalem, that my name might be there, and have chosen David to be over my people Israel. Okay, so I'm going to give you a reference here. I'm not going to read it, to 1 Kings chapter 6. Read that. And it says, basically, that 480 years had passed since the children of Israel came out of Egypt from the captivity until the time that the first temple was built and completed. So 480 years. All right. Now we're going to skip to 1 Kings chapter 8. And we're going to read verses 1, 10, and 11. Okay, so we're not going to read the whole thing. You can read that for yourself. But I just need to read these specific verses because we're short on time. All right, verse 1. It says, Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. Verse 10. And it says, And it came to pass, when the priest came out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priest could not stand and minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. So what had happened is the temple was completed. They were basically doing a dedication ceremony, and the priest brought the Ark of the Covenant, which, you remember, no one can touch. It was carried with poles, and they brought it in and they set it in the holy place. And then when they left, the glory of the Lord filled the temple, making his presence known. And his glory was so overwhelming that the priest could not remain in the temple building. And so there you have it, folks. God has now, he had a home, a building which he could dwell in which now the worship and the sacrifices and the tithes and all those things that were supposed to be done there, they had an actual place. They didn't have a movable tabernacle anymore. They had the first temple. Okay, so real quickly, Jerusalem is located where? Well, we know if you've done any kind of historical study that the Temple Mount is on Mount Zion. And for centuries, this little patch of land, it has been the most disputed and fought over land of all time. And so I want to ask you, why do you think that is? Why would that be the most fought over place in all of mankind? Well, let's think about it. What did God say? God said, he says, I'm going to place my name there. That is God's resting place. And so we know the story of Satan, Lucifer, the archangel, who was kicked out of heaven for trying to overthrow heaven because he thought he was better than God. Well, he wasn't, and he lost. And ever since, Satan has been always trying to take what God has set apart for himself. He ain't nothing but a thief, an imitator. He's a liar. And, you know, he can't have what's not his. And keep this in mind. You know, a lot of people really fear Satan. And don't get me wrong, he has a lot of power. But there's only one God. And Satan is not a God. He's just a fallen angel. So we have power over him in the name of Jesus Christ. So keep that in mind as we're talking about Jerusalem. All right, so now the last days. We're going to get into this real quickly. We're going to go to Zechariah chapter 14, and we're going to read verses 1 through 4. All right, now this is the last days, because we all know that there's the battle of Armageddon. The armies of the world are going to come against Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is going to be on the verge of being overrun and wiped out. The children of Israel are going to be, they're going to be in a bad way. And they're going to realize, hey, we need the real Messiah to come, and all of this is going to take place when? In the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, which we call the Great Tribulation period. So this is going to be one of the final battles that will be fought over Jerusalem. All right, so Zechariah 14, 1 through 4. And it says, Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very great valley, and half the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And you can go on and read this. And so what is this saying to us? It says that as Israel is on the verge of being defeated by the armies of the world, Jesus Christ is going to come back in the second coming. His feet are going to literally touch down on the Mount of Olives, which is just kind of northeast, I guess you might say, of Jerusalem. And the Kidron Valley separates the Mount of Olives from Mount Zion. And when Jesus touches down, when his feet touch the mountain, there's going to be, some say a great earthquake, but the mountain is going to divide, and it's going to split, and the armies are going to, of the world are going to be defeated by Jesus Christ. All right. So what is the significance of the Kidron Valley? From what I understand, I think I've heard Perry Stone say this, the Kidron Valley leads down to the plain of Megiddo, which we know is called to Armageddon, the Battle of Armageddon. So there's some significance there, something, a term that you may be familiar with, Armageddon. Okay, so we're going to finish this up real quick for today, and we're going to jump over to more about Jerusalem. Now this is Revelation 21 and verse 1 and 2. So we know that after the second coming, the armies of the world are going to be defeated, and Christ is going to reign and rule for 1,000 years on planet Earth. And all the nations will come, and they will bow down before him, and they will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And for those that don't, who are not willing, there's going to be a price for them to be paid. But we're not going to get into that too far, but I just kind of want to give you the update on where we are. Okay, so then Revelation 21, 1 and 2, this is, many of you familiar with this, and it says, this is John the Revelator, and he wrote this, and he said, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So, there you have it. That's all you need to know about Jerusalem. No, not really, I'm kidding. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. So you can study it out for yourself. But the importance of Jerusalem. And I want to leave you with this thought here today, that remember this, that in the last days prophecies, which is where we are right now, that Jerusalem is the compass point for all prophecies. So when it talks about the armies of the north, you could point an arrow going north, and you know where they're coming from. And when it talks about the armies from the east, you can point east across the land of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan River, and that's the area they're going to be coming from. and likewise for south and west. So anyway, remember that Jerusalem is vitally important to the Christian. A lot of history there that's being linked back to the time of Jesus. Archaeologists every day are uncovering stuff in Jerusalem and throughout all of Israel, proving that Jesus Christ really walked and taught, and he taught there, and that everything that we read in the Bible is being confirmed every day. All right, so next week, more on Jerusalem, and we'll finish this series up. Remember to like it, share it, and Jesus is coming soon, and we'll see you next week.